Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome into Redacted. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris. Busted fixing my hair. Sorry, I'm ready now. I'm ready.
She's ready.
Let's do it.
On this show, we cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. The mainstream media has been basically kicked out of the White House press room, and all the independent journalists have been basically invited back under the new first press briefing today from the White House. We've got some bombshell details about that. We're also going to talk about President Trump in about... I'm not even wearing a watch. I looked down at my watch. I just took off.
It's 2 o'clock.
At 5 p.m. Eastern time, so just a little under an hour from now, President Trump is expected to announce a massive spending freeze for the federal government to the tune of $3 trillion. The phones have been ringing off the hook today around federal agencies, wondering if their funding is going to be cut off. So we're going to dive deep into what this means today.
Oh, guess what Letitia James says, though? The Attorney General of New York says, we're going to sue him for this. I think she's just got templates of lawsuits against Trump at the ready.
Good.
So we'll see if she
Good
succeeds at that. Yes, we're also going to talk about how the mainstream media would like you to think that there are no black conservatives and that all conservatives are racist. This isn't crazy narrative that they continue to push. We're also going to talk about whether or not there is merit in banning transgender people from the military. We're going to look at exactly at what that executive order says. It doesn't exactly say no trans people in the military. It gives standards. Remember those, Clayton?
Yeah. I remember standards.
Standards of excellence.
Like, doing pull-ups, doing push-ups, fitness standards, all of that. Like, that's about to come back to the United States military, so we'll look at that.
Merit is a thing.
Yeah. And we've got a lot of other stories we're going to get to today. ICE roundups and the income tax. Trump about to end the income tax in the United States. Like, what would that do? But we just got some breaking news just a few moments ago. I just want to bring this to you here before we dive into the news, because at the Department of Justice today, there was a bomb scare. And you can take a look at these are people posting videos leaving the DOJ where they had to be evacuated just a few minutes ago. Unclear exactly what's going on there, but one of the individuals from the Civil Rights Division posted a video saying he had to be they had to be evacuated. Does this have anything to do with the round of maybe potential prosecutions that are going to come at the hands of the DOJ?
Investigations into previous prosecutions that have been happening at the Department of Justice. Now, the Trump administration has said that they will investigate how some of these prosecutions came to fruition. So, alas, that may happen. But why would there be an evacuation? Why would there be a bomb scare? Leo Terrell is the person I'm talking about. He's a civil rights attorney at the Department of Justice. He said, I had to walk down 5 flights of steps because they closed down all the elevators and evacuated the building with no explanation. Interesting, right? We will continue to
keep it
follow
here.
the story.
Yeah, we'll watch that story.
Foul.
I'm calling. Oh, yeah. You like my referee shirt.
Earlier today when she walked down and she had this on, I said, yellow flag. You look fine.
5-yard penalty.
Yeah.
No first down.
She said, wait a minute, why? I'm like, because you look like a referee. She's like, well, that's not what I was going for. Anyway.
All right.
Foul. All right, let's get into the news here in a second. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Ramp, because
if your goal is to grow your business this year, then really you need to get control of your finances. You need to make sure you have control of your employee spend, and you need to have a handle on what your months have been like. What are you spending? Why are you spending those things? Who is spending? Is it, in fact, leading to growth? So if your business is dealing with the time-consuming expense reporting process and wasting money on out-of-policy spending, then you need to look into Ramp. They can help you cut cost and improve your business's bottom line. It's the best business operators have turned to help them stop wasteful spending and improve their finance operations. With Ramp, spend policies are built into the card so you can prevent wasteful spending, something we're going to talk about in the show today when it in fact happens. So now you can get $250 off when you join Ramp. Just go to ramp.com/redacted. One more time, that's ramp.com, ramp.com/redacted. Cards are issued by Sutton Bank, which is a member of the FDIC. Terms and conditions apply.
Well, phones are ringing off the hook today all across America. Why? Because their funding is about to be cut off. According to Barron's, take a look at this. Phones in state and federal offices were jammed Tuesday with panicked calls from education and healthcare organizations, which expecting their work will be disrupted. So phones in state and federal offices jammed today with panicked phone calls from education, healthcare organizations, which expect their work will be disrupted. Why? Because President Trump, in an hour from now, or a little less than an hour from now, at 5 p.m. Eastern time today, is about to announce a $3 trillion funding freeze across the United States government, across the country. $3 trillion. Just so you understand, the federal government spends $10 trillion. $3 trillion of that to be frozen. This is a game changer if this sticks. So what this looks like, I mean, just so you understand this is a massive $3 trillion spending freeze. And let's not kid ourselves exactly what this means. This is a direct attack on the deep state and its insatiable appetite for your taxpayer dollars. So instead of helping fire victims in California when it's needed, or North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee because of flooding, or hurricane damage in Florida and no. That money, of course, is used for all sorts of deep state programs, all sorts of massive money laundering schemes, to the tunes of $3 trillion, basically, across the government, and all sorts of DEI programs, other garbage. For decades, these bureaucrats have gorged themselves on these bloated budgets using hard-earned taxpayer dollars, hard-earned money, into these wasteful programs. Going back to, remember Al Gore when he showed up on Letterman's show after they were sworn in, Bill Clinton, Al Gore? And Democrats used to be the party of, hey, we want to balance the budget. And Al Gore brought an ashtray, and he brought goggles for David Letterman, and he brought a hammer. And he said, we spend thousands of dollars in the government to see that what happens when you smash an ashtray, how many shards of of the actual glass fall on the floor. And taxpayers pay for all of this kind of garbage. That's just one example. Yes, so Democrats used to be in favor of this years ago.
If you think about this happening at the beginning of the Biden administration, fewer people would be affected. But the Biden administration went on a massive hiring spree and a spending spree. So the diameter of who will be affected is much, much wider because of the inflationary spending of the Biden administration. So, of course, there's going to be fallout because so many more people are affected now because the Biden administration vacuumed them up into their 1984 dystopic nightmare where right. Everyone is dependent on the government. So yeah, this is going to hurt. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, it's going to hurt a lot of these people who are couch potatoes, who sit on the couch and don't do anything for the United States, and they just take and take and take like leeches from the United States government. So all of these people who got Obama phones and who don't work and don't contribute to American society, yeah, a lot of these programs are on notice this afternoon. So what's going to happen with these? What's going to happen this afternoon? So this freeze goes after everything. Healthcare spending that's been abused, education programs that haven't moved the needle at all. In fact, where is America right now on the education scale?
Falling standards of reading and math across all grade levels.
So good job. Good job. All of this massive spending in the education has been a total disaster. Instead, our schools' libraries are filled with like pornography for these children. It's disgusting. So more money, all of these wasteful programs, failed policies that are lining the pockets of contractors across the government right now are on notice. And Trump is basically saying enough is enough. And it's about time. So if we're serious about saving this country from financial ruin, which is $36 trillion in debt, then they need to stop throwing this money down a black hole. We have a spending problem.
We can see how the corporate media is going to play this, is find some sad person who doesn't get their whatever check and they can't feed their family and now they're having to live with their mom or something like that.
Of course.
And this is what Donald Trump did to her, right?
Yeah,
so
I'm
pre-bunking that
yes.
that will happen, but
yeah.
it would be pithy of us to say no valid spending will not be a victim of this. There may very well be. We don't know how it will work in execution. It could be a dragnet for some things that are useful. We don't know yet.
Well, let's look at this. So let's go through where they're going to dismantle things this afternoon. They've used the federal dollars as their own slush fund, building influence, growing government, child trafficking, keeping themselves firmly entrenched in Washington, D.C. Trump is going to yank the rug out from under them. And that's why you're already seeing the establishment freaking out this afternoon. Democrats are crying foul. Chuck Schumer said this. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer just a little while ago. He says this decision is lawless, dangerous, destructive, cruel. It's illegal. to cut government spending. It's illegal. Okay. But let's get real. When have these people ever cared at all about the American taxpayer? When have Democrats ever cared about the American taxpayer?
Well, Congress does set the budget. That's why we go into a government shutdown every 6 months. So we'll see exactly how legal or illegal it is, because Joe Biden still spent, even though Congress is supposed to cut the budget. So you want to fight? Let's do it. Let's take it and see what the rules are. Let's do it.
Yeah,
let's do that.
It doesn't seem like it's going to get budgeted any other way. No. When was the last
That's not
time
an
we had a
argument,
budget?
though. Right. That's like no one else is going to do it, so he has to. I think that's a dangerous argument to make.
Why?
Yeah, no, I agree. But
you can make that for anything, and then it's an egregious expansion of power. Congress won't do it, so I have to. Don't you see the danger in that?
Well, he can only do so much. Where he can, and that's why we have, that's why we have checks and balances, right? That's what the founding fathers wanted. So, but he has certain powers under the executive branch, which is ballooned massively under Biden. So he can certainly cut down on the massive ballooning of the executive branch, which he's in charge of. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, yes, the House of Representatives runs the power of the purse in the United States. They have to pass this budget resolution, and whether it's going to be one or two bills in the next few weeks, we're going to have to see how this all shakes out. Trump, I think, really wants this one bill. It's going to be unclear if they're going to be able to separate it into two bills, but this is all the behind-the-scenes moving and shaking right now happening on Capitol Hill. So I don't know, but look, Elon Musk, by the way, markets. Just checking the markets. On this news, the market surged. And you remember yesterday when they took a total dump, the NASDAQ did yesterday, because of DeepSeek, which is the new Chinese AI competitor to ChatGPT, which rolled out for like a fraction of the cost. And all of these like tech stocks in America were like, holy crap, China did it for like a fraction of the cost. So all these tech stocks dumped yesterday. Market surged today on this news. What's that, Philip?
I saw a pretty funny line. Somebody on Reddit said that ChatGPT lost its job to AI.
Yeah.
It's very meta.
Yeah. So all of these billions that we're pouring into Silicon Valley for AI, and then China comes out with this DeepSeek, and it's like a fraction of the cost, and it's doing things as well as ChatGPT. So everyone's like, wait a minute, did we just overspend billions of dollars, and they were able to do it for a fraction of the cost? So anyway, my point is markets surged on this news, on the idea of slashing $3 trillion. So it's been a down couple of hours for the markets.
Which tells me that they have all along known that in order to combat inflation, the government has to spend less too. The markets have known this all along. We didn't really see them speaking out about that during the Biden administration, but they're responding with their dollars, which makes me a little bit crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So Elon Musk, though, thinks this is great news. He said this in a tweet. He said, this is a necessary step to streamline government operations and focus on essential services. He's right. I mean, every dollar these deep state swamp rats are spending comes from you. That's the thing people forget. Like, you go to work. You work up until May or June of the year to pay taxes to the federal government. Then they take those dollars and they throw them into DEI programs and pornography books in children's schools. Like, that's how they're taking your dollars and then buying this garbage and enriching these people. The money laundering scheme has got to stop, and I'm there for it.
Not to mention making slaves of working class people with government handout programs.
So I forgot specifically to mention this. So the federal here's what we're hearing, that Trump will keep this. How long? Excuse me. What we're hearing is that Trump will keep this freeze in place, and the federal dollars won't be released until programs are free of Marxist equity, transgenderism, and Green New Deal social engineering. Of course, this is from an internal White House memo from Matthew Vaith, the acting director of Office of Management and Budget. So those three things: Marxist equity, transgenderism, and the Green New Deal social engineering. So all of these programs have to remove all of that before they get any funding back again.
That's pretty much every educational program.
Okay. On top of that, we're not done. Last night, Trump dropped a bombshell about income taxes. So now you'll recall back, I think it was in December, when he floated the idea of eliminating the income tax for you and me, for all Americans. Mm-hmm. And I remember DC Drano posted, if he does this, that would be the greatest move. He would be remembered as the greatest president in American history.
For sure, because Americans were promised that the federal income tax would be temporary twice during the Civil War and during World War I. The income tax was repealed after the Civil War. So if it's been done before, it can be done again. I posted something on my X that I think you should seek out, is that when the federal government wanted to tamp down this conversation about the income tax being temporary, it hired Walt Disney Studios to make a Donald Duck animated film about Donald Duck learning why it's patriotic to pay your taxes and really coming around on the issue. Please seek that out on my X page.
Yeah, it's amazing the propaganda that was used. So yes, it was used to fund the Civil War, and then after the Civil War it was repealed because guess what? We weren't in a war anymore. And then it didn't come back until 1913 when we were embroiled in World War I, and it was used, hey, we need this to fund World War I, and then it just never was repealed. Ron Paul writes about this in his book, about this. And it's amazing because it's illegal. It's not in the Constitution, and frankly, Americans shouldn't even have to pay income taxes. But now, and it's not even codified, like, look it up. So President Trump last night dropped a bombshell about this, saying, we want to go back to the 1880s era of the Gilded Age in America, where we had massive growth. We based a lot of it on tariffs. We had no income taxes, largest growth in world history at that time. We want to go back to that. So if he eliminates the income tax, I mean, I don't know all the legal machinations of how this is going to come to fruition, because there's a lot of people in Washington, D.C., the war machine, that wants this money. You cannot have all these wars without income taxes. Yeah. So we cannot be in Syria. We can't be in Africa. We can't be sending all this money to Israel. We can't be trying to fight against Russia and Ukraine.
We
can't
have
do any
to be
of that.
Fiscally conservative with a finite dollar.
We can't do any of that if we don't have income taxes.
The Federal Reserve is also an enabler of that as well, which is what Ron Paul says in his book, is that it enables the United States to wage countless wars. And all of these people who are sort of milking at the government teat right now and wondering how they will then continue to survive. Have you ever heard this expression I heard recently? The problem with socialism is you always run out of other people's money.
Right.
We may in fact see that we don't have to do that.
So will income taxes be eliminated? We'll have to see what Trump does on that front, but I think that would be, it would be the ultimate game changer if he can pull that off. And how many members of Congress would be on board with that? How many people who are tied to the military-industrial complex who might have all of their funding cut as a result of income taxes being slashed? That's a big piece of this. So we'll have to see.
Bruce in the chat says, wouldn't you still have sales tax? Yes, most likely, and a state tax. And then you'd see states competing as they do already.
Like Florida.
For a low state tax.
Well, that's why so many people moved to Puerto Rico. Like, the likes of like Peter Schiff and other economists and investors, they moved to Puerto Rico. Why? Because they don't have to pay income tax. Mm-hmm. If you're there for 6 months and a day, I think 6 months and a day out of a year, they don't have to pay income taxes for their business, right? For their business. Yeah. For their business.
I expected him to maybe go ahead, Philip. You go first.
I would say I live in Washington State and we don't have an income tax. And and there's Oregon doesn't have a sales tax. So like the ideal situation is to live in Oregon and work in Washington, because then you're not paying any. Really.
Yeah. I mean, you'd have, and then, like Delaware, no sales tax, right? So you have different states that would be, as Natalie points out, competing for businesses. Like what would New Jersey do? It has like massive taxes, right? New Jersey has the highest property taxes in the country. Like what would they do to try to compete with all of the businesses leaving New Jersey to go to Florida and Texas and Nashville and Tennessee and so forth?
I expected that the Trump administration would start with certain programs, because one of his campaign promises was no tax on tips and no tax on Social Security, because of course you put post-tax dollars into your Social Security fund, and then you're taxed when you withdraw them. So the government gets 2 bites of the apple and a third bite when you buy something with it and have to pay taxes on top of that as well. Yeah. And so one thing that he had said is possibly no tax on Social Security, no tax on tips. Thomas Massey has floated the idea of no taxes on people under 18, which there already is an exemption, but it's $15,000. So these are things that we could get in piecemeal, or we could just get a whole sledgehammer to it, which seems to be his method of operation in the first 8 days of his administration. I'm very perplexed. I told Clayton earlier with this whole idea of like, he says he's going to do something and then he does it. It doesn't compute in my world as a political journalist.
We're not used to that. Honestly, we're not used to that at all. So it's remarkable that we're seeing this. Now, will he be able to do it? I love someone in our chat here just said, come on, Redacted, shout it loud. Barbara says, come on, Redacted, shout it loud. So no income taxes. Okay. Shout it loud. All right.
Was that what we were supposed to shout? Or
I don't care. Yeah. And by the way, if Biden did that, I would be praising him. I'd say it was one of the greatest moves in presidential history if Biden would have eliminated income taxes for people. You want to help people? Eliminate income taxes. But he didn't. Word. So anyway.
All right. Well, the U.S. Army is about to get a complete makeover because President Trump, as promised, issued that executive order that is lightly going to I don't want to say it will remove transgender people. Here's what it's going to do. It's going to remove gender ideology from the U.S. military. It isn't a ban on trans military members. It's more nuanced than that. So let's go through it, because it means these images I'm about to show you, we will no longer have that anymore. Remember this guy who made the drag recruiting video? Next person who said that having soldiers be their authentic selves keeps them safe.
By the way, can we go back to that first image? Because that guy actually was a mouthpiece of the military, of the Navy.
That was recruiting video he did in drag.
Yeah, he was a recruiter. Mm-hmm. And he was hired in that role to be as a drag recruiter, basically.
Indeed, he did that. And then we also, of course, know about Admiral Rachel Levine, who advocated that all children be advocates of gender transition. Here is the Trump order. It does not specifically say that trans people cannot serve in the military. It does say that the new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has 60 days to renew medical standards for the military, and they must reflect high standards of physical and mental fitness. The order will remove this is the language. It says invented and identification-based pronoun usage. It will prevent the military from allowing males to use or share sleeping, changing, or bathing facilities for females and vice versa. And also it says we have to have this high standard for troop readiness, and that's inconsistent with the policies of gender dysphoria, such as allowing people to medically transition and change their pronouns at will and whatnot. So this is a reversal of the Biden era executive orders allowing all of the above. The Human Rights Commission says that it is going to sue to prevent this from taking effect. So you may wonder, well, why do you care if a trans person is serving their country? Shouldn't you thank them? Shouldn't you thank all military members for their service? Well, here's a few reasons why we should care. Number one, they are not deployable. We have shown you, and I will show you again, documents from the Biden administration showing that they can be put on permanent non-deployable status while the government pays for their sex change. That is the law right now. Basically, they get sex changes on taxpayer dollars, but they don't have to risk their lives like other soldiers. Number two, the government knows that these sex changes make them weaker. They've admitted this. I'm going to show you that in a minute as well. Why is it in the government's interest to tear apart bodies and make them fatter and weaker? Why? You have to make that argument to me. And number three, we already have a pretty good case study in Chelsea Manning or Bradley Manning. No, I think Bradley Manning is a hero. I don't want to downplay that. But not only does he admit to using the military as a place to hunt for men to have sex with in this book, if you read it, which I have, he also says that his mental strength served him well when he was tortured by the Obama administration. He also chronicles how he fought for cross-sex hormones while he was in prison. And when he won them, he says they broke down my mental resolve. He started to struggle with big time anxiety. When he was on them, he wasn't able to any longer handle tough mental conditions imposed on him by Obama, because that's what these hormones do. He admits it in his book. It made him worse. He says so. So why in the world would we want to obligate the government to give these people procedures knowing that they are incongruent with physical and mental toughness? Here is where I'm getting all of this. This was a leaked memo from the Biden administration with policies that allowed trans members to skip deployments, receive indefinite waivers for grooming, physical fitness, and drug testing. I could argue that this is discriminatory towards non-trans people, because if you're not trans, you have to go on deployments. You have to adhere to physical standards. You have to do all of these things. Trans people get a pass for this. It was basically using the military as a clinique counter for whatever your little heart desired. Here was the buffet of services that is, I'm going to say is until this executive order by Trump, is the buffet of services that the military offers: speech therapy, cross-sex hormones, boob jobs, boob removal, body contouring, genital reassignment surgery. Can you imagine taking a soldier and cutting off his junk and thinking that this is what the military is there for? It's been happening. It did, however, make the distinction that government hospitals could not do laser hair removal.
Oh, they stopped there.
That's where they stopped. They're like, we just don't have the machines to do it right now. You're going to have to go elsewhere.
Estheticians or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Can't get a Brazilian wax.
Can you imagine getting a bikini laser on the military base hospital? David Goggins is dying on this one.
Oh my God.
Well, they're supposed to give you guns, not take them away, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. Okay. That's a great point, because look at this bit from the document. It says many times that cross-sex hormones are dangerous and have negative side effects, such as here, where it says that service members who take these hormones risk body fat redistribution and loss of muscle. This is not something you're supposed to do to a soldier. In fact, the Captain America is coming out. We're supposed to do the opposite of that, right? Take a look at this screen. You don't want to go from the guy in the suspenders to the guy without a shirt. You want to go the other direction. That's what the military wants to do. Is
they go the opposite of super soldier serum.
This is what Philip has famously called on this show. What was it? Sub-soldier serum.
Right.
Was that your joke, Philip?
Yeah, I think that was Philip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that sound about like me?
Inadequate soldier serum.
Exactly that. The document also said that you could not use gender dysphoria diagnosis to get out of the military, but you could use it to get out of deployment. Here's how they specify. You have 300 days to go through your sex change, and then you get reevaluated. And if you're not doing well, you just get that non-deployable status permanently put in place by doctors. Also, they can get exemptions to physical fitness tests. Rob Smith is a decorated veteran and political commentator, and I might say a gay man. He says that trans military members remain a medical burden. So even though they don't deploy, they can get out early, and we have to keep paying for their sex change and hormones in perpetuity. Not only that, he says that he had trans military members who served with him, and it was really uncomfortable because their mental distress was always so high. Watch him say it for himself.
The vast majority of transgender people, when they separate from the United States military, do so by medically separating. This means that they are at 80 to 100% disability. And so now what that means is that they are on the taxpayers, they're on the hook. Taxpayers are on the hook, for $200,000 to $300,000 per year annually of quote unquote transgender healthcare, which is also covered by the VA. So every single transgender person that separates from the military via medical discharge is covered by the VA for their hormones or their test, like whatever it is that the trans person is on, that is covered by the VA because they are medically separated. This costs American taxpayers to the tune upwards of 6 figures per person, all right? Third of all, gender dysphoria is a documented mental illness, which means that we have these people that are not only non-combat deployable, they are also costing the U.S. taxpayer $100,000 plus per year for their health care, and they also have a documented mental health condition. This is why Trump has signed or is about to sign the executive order banning transgender people from the military, because the military is not a medical experiment. Taxpayers should not be footing the bill for this. And also, on a personal note, if you know anything about my history, I am a gay soldier, I'm a gay veteran. I actually protested to end until the law that banned gay and lesbian soldiers from serving openly. Trans got sort of added to that at the last minute. And I will not say who this person is, but I was involved in liberal activism with more than one trans-identified soldier back in the day. And what I will tell you, and again, I'm not going to say this person's name, but the receipts are all out there on the internet. This is one of the most mentally unstable people I have ever dealt with in my entire life. And the thought of sharing a military combat unit with somebody, and this was a quote-unquote transgender woman, somebody that was this unstable, gives me a lot of pause, and it even gave me pause back then. So when you think about the fact that Trump is banning trans from the military, I want you to think about those facts.
Wow.
And in fact, we know that transgender or gender dysphoria coexists with a lot of other morbidities, and people usually have other anxieties and mental health disorders. Now think about how we freaked out here on Redacted anyway, when the Ukrainian army started admitting people with Down syndrome, mental health disorders, because it's cruel. Why should we have a carve out for this one mental health disorder? And even if we could remove these carve outs and say, okay, you can serve, but you have to go to combat and we're not going to pay for your surgeries, would they want to? And would it be fair to the people they are fighting alongside if in fact they do have these mental health comorbidities? Now, along this same line of reasoning, because most definitely this will be tested in the courts, Yale law professor Jed Rubenfeld published this video this week about the Supreme Court case where Tennessee is trying to ban minors from sex changes. He thinks that Tennessee will be able to keep this ban in place. This is a great video for many reasons, but one of them is that transgendered people are not a suspect class. Watch him make the point better.
Professor, couldn't plaintiffs say that even if this isn't a case of unconstitutional sex discrimination, it's still a case of unconstitutional trans discrimination? Couldn't the Supreme Court hold that even if the law doesn't trigger heightened scrutiny as a form of sex classification, it does trigger heightened scrutiny as a form of trans discrimination, that trans status is another suspect classification? Trans people are another suspect class for equal protection purposes. Couldn't the court say that? Yes, they could. But will they? That I very much doubt. Here's the problem. The court has not recognized a new suspect class in decades. The court does not confer suspect class status for equal protection purposes on many groups that have long been subject to discrimination in this country and that still are. The court does not recognize older people as a suspect class. The court does not recognize physically disabled people as a suspect class or mentally disabled people as a suspect class. The court doesn't even recognize officially homosexuality as a suspect classification. So I just don't think that a majority of the Supreme Court is going to find that there's a new suspect class out there existing of trans people, or a new suspect classification existing of trans status. They haven't done it in so many cases. They've refused to do it in so many cases. I just don't think they're going to do it here.
My mind would be blown if they do. Because when older people, disabled people are not a protected class, but trans people are, that would blow my mind. I don't think it's going to happen. So how then are these advocacy groups going to fight this? I don't know. How can they possibly argue that the government must hire people with mental conditions and provide them with medication that makes their bodies hurt less strong and less safe, especially when that's not a suspect class? So let me know what you think of that.
Well, remember all those drone sightings over military bases in the fall of last year? You remember we saw them all over the place, all up and down the eastern seaboard. They were over military bases. They were over people's houses. They were over government offices, thousands of sightings. The Biden administration saying that we don't know where they're from. We don't really have any idea at all. They might be Chinese. They might be Iranian. They might be commercial. They might be personal. We don't know anything about it. So President Trump was asked on Inauguration Day, on January 20th, when he was in the Oval Office, you'll recall, about these drones. And he turns to his chief of staff and says, hey, can we get this answer for the American people? And then we got the answer today, 8 days later, from Carolyn Leavitt, who is the White House press secretary. So just unbelievable. Eight days, we finally get an answer on this. Watch.
But is it anything, these drones, is it anything that people need to be worried about?
No, I think it's terrible. I would like to find out what it is and tell the people.
And can you commit to some kind of...
In fact, I'd like to do that. Could we find out what that was, Susie? Okay? Yeah, why don't we find out immediately? I mean, I can't imagine it's an enemy, or there would have been, people would have gotten blown up all over. Maybe they were testing things. I don't know why they wouldn't have said what it was. They had a lot of them flying over Bedminster, which is interesting, right?
And with the events today,
And before I turn to questions, I do have news directly from the President of the United States that was just shared with me in the Oval Office. From President Trump directly, an update on the New Jersey drones. After research and study, the drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other reasons. Many of these drones were also hobbyists, recreational, and private individuals that enjoy flying drones. In time, it got worse due to curiosity. This was not the enemy. A statement from the President of the United States to start this briefing with some news. And with that, I will turn it over to...
So not the enemy from the United States. Approved FAA knew about this. So the United States government knew about this, and it was approved by the Federal Aviation Administration. They wouldn't tell us this. They lied to us, and they obfuscated for how many weeks?
Well, actually, no, we did get Joe Biden saying, yeah, we got to look into this. And then nothing happened. We also got President Trump saying, yeah, we got to look into this. And then we got an answer. It's very strange. I don't understand this.
The one congressman that said that it was clearly from a Chinese mothership just off the coast of New Jersey.
Yeah.
He had authority. Remember that?
No, it was an Iranian mothership. Yeah. Was it an Iranian mothership or was it Chinese?
I think it was Iranian.
Oh, yeah. Some kind of mothership off the East Coast, and they're coming for us. Mm-hmm. And again, this all came at an interesting time when DHS was trying to get drone funding, right? So as part of that year-end continuing resolution for money, they were scrambling to get as much money as they could for their drone program. And oh my God, what better way than to get money than to scare the American people that we better get our own drone program in place because all of these drones are flying over the United States and these are enemies. These are Iranian. We should go to war with Iran, right? Turns out, no, they were American. They were not, had nothing to do with Iran, had nothing to do with China, nothing. And so remember when Kirby basically told us, basically was like hiding the information at the White House? Here's an example of John Kirby.
If the president as commander-in-chief believed, based on the information that he'd been given, that there was a national security threat at play here, or even a public safety threat at play here, he would issue the appropriate directives to not only law enforcement, but perhaps even the military if that was needed. I want to go back to something I said at the top. There has been no evidence of any of this activity in or near restricted spaces.
That's not what the senators said in the letter. They said, in fact, that they've been observed maneuvering their critical infrastructure, sensitive locations, including reservoirs and military installations, and cited a concern from law enforcement about public safety threats because a medevac helicopter was prevented from transporting a seriously injured patient for care because of the presence of these drones.
I stand by my opening statement.
So we have evidence that they're flying over military installations. We know they're over military installations. I'm going to stand by my initial thing, what I said earlier, even though you just...
And the FAA apparently knew about it, so he could have got some answers if he tried.
They didn't want to tell us.
He was trying to.
It was all part of a plan. Again, the military-industrial complex was pushing for more funding in order to scare the American people. They're Iranian drones. They're going to attack Trump. Remember, we warned you about this months ago. Don't believe the false flags about Iran. We covered that extensively here on the show. So now we have confirmation that in many ways this was a false flag. Maybe not as like dramatic and harmful as like the USS Liberty false flag, which killed Americans when the CIA teamed up with Israel and killed Americans on the USS Liberty in 1967. But this still was a false flag. I don't know how else to read it. The whole purpose is to scare us.
And then you purposely withhold the truth. That's a lie.
That's a false flag by the Biden administration. Mm-hmm. Cut and dry, in my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong. But by the way, can we just give a shout out to the new White House press secretary? Because she was asked, she was asked by one of the reporters today in her first press briefing, would she lie? Would she tell the truth at that podium? Or would she lie to the American people? Here was her response in her first day on the job.
Miller.
Thanks, Caroline. A question that we've asked your predecessors of both parties in this job. When you're up here in this briefing room speaking to the American public, do you view yourself and your role as advocating on behalf of the president, or providing the unvarnished truth that is, not to lie, not to obfuscate to the American people?
I commit to telling the truth from this podium every single day. I commit to speaking on behalf of the President of the United States. That is my job. And I will say it's very easy to speak truth from this podium when you have a president who is implementing policies that are wildly popular with the American people, and that's exactly what this administration is doing. It's correcting the lies and the wrongs of the past 4 years, many of the lies that have been told to your faces in this very briefing room. I will not do that. But since you brought up Truth Seek, I would like to point out, while I vowed to provide the truth from this podium, we ask that all of you in this room hold yourselves to that same standard. We know for a fact there have been lies that have been pushed by many legacy media outlets in this country about this president, about his family, and we will not accept that. We will call you out when we feel that your reporting is wrong or there is misinformation about this White House. So yes, I will hold myself to the truth, and I expect everyone in this room to do the same.
And Caroline,
ouch.
Slay. She also said that she is going to reinstate 440 press passes for journalists who she said were wrongly revoked by the Biden administration. And they're opening up press passes to bloggers, influencers, other podcasters, because she says that the mainstream media no longer has the monopoly on information. They have not been trustworthy with it. They do not get to be the gatekeepers anymore, which is a big which is a big middle finger to them. And I love it.
You won't get a White House press corps application with that kind of mouth.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm just joking. See, many people in the chat are saying, "Hey, is Redacted going to be in the White House press corps?" We're submitting our application for it, and we'll see if we're approved for it. And yeah, we'll see. But so it'll be interesting to see. It's refreshing to have a White House press secretary. She said we're going to welcome all. Like, it doesn't matter if you're like pro-Trump, anti-Trump. It doesn't matter. All voices into this White House press briefing room. By the way, that room is really, really small. So I don't know if you want to be in that like sweaty little box room. But yeah, we'll keep our eye on that space. See how she does. See if she lies like Corinne Jean-Pierre.
Well, let's talk more about media lies, because New York Magazine has been called out for this magazine cover and feature story indicating that all conservative influencers are spoiled, rich, white jerks. This is a party you're looking at of influencers for the inauguration weekend. So they were celebrating the incoming Trump administration. Twice the article tries to paint these people as very white. 2 sentences. The author himself says almost everyone is white, and then it quotes an older woman in an updo saying, "Have you noticed the entire room is white?" The problem is that is a canard, because the party you're seeing here was hosted by a black conservative named C.J. Pearson. Black people were edited out of the photo. Now, in all fairness, the online version of the article does have this picture. So if you're playing Where's Waldo, you can count several black people. Here they are circled by another user on X. So they specifically cropped out black people. Why do you think they would do this? And in fact, on X, CJ Pearson says, not only was I at the party, it was my party. He says, I hosted this event and they left me out because it would have undermined their narrative that MAGA is a racist cult. They didn't also include the fact that these other, he tags black people, were there. Some black attendees have said, well, then I'll show you myself that I was at the party, and have posted pictures of themselves taking pictures. Now, oddly enough, the author quotes Xavier DeRosso, who's been on this show a few times. The author says he was having fun. He had all kinds of fun outfits. He also calls him a transphobe. The author calls Xavier a transphobe, indicating that conservatives are, because he never clarifies that Xavier is black. So he's trying to make it seem to you that he is spoiled enough to have nice outfits. He's a transphobe and he's having a fun time. But this is Xavier. You've seen him here on Redacted. The author never mentions that he's black. The author only mentions race when it validates his portrayal of conservatives as cruel, spoiled whites, but otherwise leaves out race altogether, even when mentioning black people. Did the editor not check that you're painting this room white, but your quote is from a black guy, and that Xavier is black, I just wonder. That should not be too much of a shock, though, that given that the author is clearly immersed in identity politics. This is Brock Collier, although his New York Magazine profile tells me that he's not a he, he's a they. It says they cover nightlife, which explains why he writes things such as how inexplicably beautiful all the conservatives in the room are, which I guess is undeniable. If you look at that picture, everyone looks beautiful, right? They're also dressed to the nines because this is inauguration weekend. He describes one party goer as a beefcake lawyer. Okay. It's a weird article. His writing is petty and it's jealous and it's full of epithets that he doesn't feel the need to prove, like transphobe. You can just throw that out. He calls people cruel. He doesn't explain it. He just signals with these dog whistling words. He says that there's a Bernie supporter in the room who just said he wanted the freedom to say these words. I'm not going to say them. You can read them on your screen. So does this make the entire group cruel because one person wanted an expanding lexicon? I don't know. And he actually acknowledges that even though this guy wanted to say that word, the F word we use for cigarette, he acknowledges that homosexuality is very accepted in conservative circles. He says in this world, it is entirely possible in this world to be very gay. Such as the idea of fangirling over Scott Pressler, the gay activist who worked so hard in Pennsylvania to get Trump elected.
Well, Trump's new Treasury Secretary has a husband.
Yeah.
Scott Bessent.
I think he hasn't admitted that publicly, has he?
I think it's well known.
Okay.
Unless forgive me if I just outed him, but I think I've read it. I mean, it's all over the place. Everyone knows that.
Okay.
By the way, Trump appointed previously to his cabinet in the first administration openly gay cabinet members. So this is not the first time. And by the way, gays voted overwhelmingly for Trump in a record-breaking numbers because they're sick and tired of the transgender ideology co-opting their movement, and they voted overwhelmingly for Trump in record numbers.
Right. So what I'm rejecting is this idea that they're all a cruel crowd, but they're accepting of all kinds of people. But some of them want to say words that the rest of us don't want to say. That doesn't mean the whole room is cruel. I'm pretty sure that this is a false race portrayal that must be answered for. Recall when we forced Time to answer for why they darkened Obama's skin, and we got an explanation. Recall this controversy. Why did Time so deeply darken O.J. Simpson? This was a media scandal. I think that this is a media scandal of similar proportions in that it's a racial distortion to sell a false narrative that conservatives are cruel and exclusionary. And I think what they're really afraid of is that black people would feel comfortable in this room, which obviously many of them did, because they want black people to think you're not welcome there. This is not a place for you. This is not your politics. You need to suckle at the teat of the Democratic Party. And they're terrified of that.
That's the second teat reference today on the show.
I've said it twice.
It's Teat Tuesday here on the show. Well, by the way, I should mention, we got both teats.
You need to.
I should mention, I'm not the one that outed Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Okay. You can take my laptop here, Philip, if you can. Do I have it? There it is. Yeah. So, yes, he is the highest ranking out gay person in U.S. history, the new Treasury Secretary, and very, very smart man, by the way.
The reason I'm saying this is because I was researching this article and I asked ChatGPT if he was gay, and it told me I shouldn't ask those questions.
Yeah.
It scolded me for even asking.
Should have asked.
So, okay. I know, right? Yeah. Okay. Now, this is... one more time, we'll just check in on Brock Collier because he has been called out for painting this false narrative and has since closed down his Twitter. New York Magazine has not yet retracted the story or apologized, but the author has again set his account to private. So I think they need to apologize. Number one, to the black people they quoted. Number two, to the black people they cropped out. And to the black people who were hosting the parties that they omitted, because this is a lie by omission. And in my opinion, it's a blaring one. So let me know what you think.
All right. Where are we?
Media. We're talking about the media and how they're crap.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about the media because we've got one last virtue signaling from Jim Acosta at CNN. Jim Acosta Jim Acosta, one of the worst news anchors in the United States, and the bloviating, virtue signaling anchor Jim Acosta from CNN has announced he's leaving after they basically tried to put him in the overnight shift or the late night shift so no one would see him. So because no one wants to watch the guy, and CNN's ratings are in the tank. Obviously, they've had to fire so many people now at CNN, and now he's of course one of them that they were hoping would leave with his high salary. So here is Jim announcing, you know what? I'm not going to be moved to the night shift. I'm just going to leave. Watch.
It is never a good time to bow down to a tyrant. I've always believed it's the job of the press to hold power to account. I've always tried to do that here at CNN, and I plan on doing all of that in the future. One final message. Don't give in to the lies. Don't give in to the fear. Hold on to the truth and to hope. Even if you have to get out your phone, record that message. I will not give in to the lies. I will not give in to the fear. Post it on your social media so people can hear from you too. I'll have more to say about my plans in the coming days, but until then, I want to thank all of you for tuning in. It has been an honor to be welcomed into your home for all these years. That's the news. Reporting from Washington, I'm Jim Acosta.
Oh, we're shedding tears.
So they basically office spaced him like Milton into the basement, and he
down in the basement.
I did not receive my paycheck.
I was promised that I could have a stapler.
They said that I could tell the news at a reasonable volume.
I was told that I could listen. I was listening to my music at a reasonable volume.
I did not receive a piece of cake.
I will be down here in the basement. That's where Jim Acosta was about to be sent. So he was like, "No, I'm going to leave." I'm hoping.
We're in the basement. We should be honest about it. I don't want to be called out for that.
I'm hoping. But we get way more views than CNN by a landslide. So it's nice to feel that way. Independent media here. What was I going to say?
He's a dip.
Well, he's a dip, but I hope that he actually launches like his own podcast or something like Don Lemon.
He's indicated that he will. He says, I intend to still
Jim
do
Acosta
my journalism.
Jim Acosta. This is an example. So when you have like people like Don Lemon who no one watched, and then he goes out there and he like launches his own podcast, and then no one subscribed.
I would love him to come to Redacted. And then he'll, pitch us a story and we'll be like, okay, but that's a lie. So come back to us when you don't have lies.
Right.
Hey, maybe
you got to kill that piece too. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I'm killing that piece too.
You know what? I will just Jim Acosta as our press secretary.
I will just Theon Greyjoy him until he can actually speak nothing but truth. That's what I will do. Is I will hire him and shoot down every lie he's got, and then he will only be capable of speaking truth. Donald
Trump loved to go toe to toe with Jim Acosta. You'll recall, and some of the amazing moments where Trump got to shout him down, like right. And didn't shout him down. He just told him to sit down, stop talking, watch.
But your campaign had an ad showing migrants climbing over walls and so on.
Well, that's true.
But
they weren't actors.
They're not going to be doing that.
They weren't actors. Well, no, it's true. Do you think they were actors? They weren't actors. They didn't come from Hollywood. Right. These were people. This was an actual. It happened a few days ago. And
they're hundreds of miles away, though. They're hundreds and hundreds of miles away. That's not an invasion.
Honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
All right.
And if you did it well, your ratings would be much better.
If I may ask one other question, Mr. President, if I may ask one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. President, I was going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President,
that's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other question, if I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have?
I'm not concerned about anything with the Russian investigation because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
Mr. President.
I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go ahead.
I think.
Okay, Jim Acosta, you could come work for us, and your first assignment will be thoroughly investigating the Russia investigation.
Right, the hoax.
Yeah. And then
we'll hire Jim Acosta to go. We'll put him on the Hunter Biden laptop story. That'll be his primary focus. No, you know what we'll do? We'll hire Jim Acosta and we'll send him to the southern border.
Okay.
So he can watch. Actually, we'll send him to the most dangerous spot on the southern border, the El Paso sector, right in between New Mexico and Texas.
Well, we're not wishing him physical harm.
No, I want him to see.
But I would like him to
actually
look at the documents and Crossfire Hurricane and how that came about, and shadow Kash Patel and actually learn the truth about that. And then he won't feel so brave for standing up and asking this non sequitur question about the Russia investigation after a question about the border wall. So you're going to learn something, but you have a job offer here if you want one.
Oh, love it. All right, we've got more news to get to here on your Teat Tuesday, Taco Tuesday, and Teat Tuesday as well. Will President Trump end the income tax? Well, we've got someone who's testified in front of Congress on the Inflation Reduction Act. He's a tax expert. What would this do for the U.S. economy if they eliminate income taxes? We're going to talk to Dr. Preston Bashir in just a moment on that. But first, do you ever have the feeling that you're being surveilled and hesitate to share things of interest via text message or email with your friends and loved ones? Recently, outspoken parents at PTA meetings, Catholic Americans have been labeled as domestic terrorists by the FBI. These types of labels can be used by the U.S. government to surveil its citizens and others who live abroad without legal due process. We're hoping the Trump administration ends this practice. However, the founders of Bunker created an app to uphold people's rights. Bunker is not beholden to any third-party corporation, investor, or government. Bunker deeply believes that personal privacy is a human right and that everyone on Earth deserves bank-level protection and bank-level security. Bunker provides you protection from state and corporate surveillance as well as cyber criminals. It includes a completely secure private messenger platform, robust password manager, secure cloud storage for your files and documents. Bunker is built to uphold the rights of people and protect them from cyber crimes. So download Bunker today from the App Store or the Google Play Store. Just use the offer code REDACTED to receive 25% off. Visit bunker.life or visit the App Store or Google Play Store. Well, a few months ago, then President-elect Donald Trump floated the idea of a bombshell that he'd like to eliminate income taxes in the United States. And a lot of people said if he did that, he could become the greatest president in American history. He'd probably be up on Mount Rushmore if he did such a thing. Then last night, he doubled down on this. This wasn't just a campaign promise. He mentioned last night that we need to return to a time when we used tariffs to enrich our country and ended income taxes after the Civil War, basically in the 1880s, the Gilded Age of America. Listen.
America is going to be very rich again, and it's going to happen very quickly. It's time for the United States to return to the system that made us richer and more powerful than ever before. Do you know the United States in 1870 to 1913, all tariffs, and that was the richest period in the history of the United States, relatively speaking. In other words, relatively. And they set up the Great Tariff Commission of 1887, and this commission had one function: what to do with all the money that we took in. It was so enormous that they had no idea. It was a blue ribbon committee. It was set up 1887. And what to do with all of the money that we had. And again, Teddy Roosevelt was a beneficiary because when McKinley was killed, he took over this vast sum of money and he did all of those national parks and all of the other things. And I'm not knocking him, but he was given a vast amount of money. And that was all made through tariffs. We had no income tax. The income tax came in 1913. As I said in my speech last week, instead of taxing our citizens to enrich foreign nations, we should be tariffing and taxing foreign nations to enrich our citizens. Does that make sense, right?
So eliminating income taxes, cutting spending, what's going on in Washington? And plus, we've got this massive bombshell breaking news this afternoon of cutting federal spending. Let's ask Dr. Preston Bashir, who has testified before Congress over the damage that Biden's Inflation Reduction Act would do to our country. He's a Heritage Foundation Tax Policy Research Fellow. Dr. Bashir, welcome to the show. Great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. So I want to talk about income taxes here in a second, which is already a huge story. But just in a short time, about 5 p.m. tonight, President Trump is expected to announce freezing across all federal agencies, education, healthcare, everything, $3 trillion in freezing of government money, which if our government spends $10 trillion. So this $3 trillion of $10 trillion is massive until all Marxist ideology, transgenderism, Green New Deal, social engineering is removed from these policies. This is a pretty big story. First, what do you make of this breaking news?
Well, I think I make of it that Donald Trump means business. He said that he was going to come in and make some serious changes. And one of the first things that we saw was day one with all those executive orders. It was you just go through the list, and there were tons of them devoted to rooting out DEI, CRT, all this stuff that had been put in there by the Biden administration. It was just DEI after DEI after DEI, and that's really what a big part of the last administration was about. Was just I think infiltrating so many parts of our federal government, state and local governments through grants with this DEI stuff that's been so toxic, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think it's great that he's showing that he means business. I'm not too worried about it from a budget and spending perspective, because we're in trouble there, and he needs to be serious about that as well. And so I applaud this decision.
You applaud the decision. Elon Musk also applauding it. He says this is a necessary step to streamline government operations, focus on essential services, though Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer not happy about this. They plan to fight this in court. He says this decision is lawless, dangerous, destructive, cruel. It's illegal, halting government funding in such a way. But I think as you were, point out here, like the markets are up right now. So how do you think? It seems like the markets are responding to this in a positive way. No?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think if anything, the markets have a reason to be jittery about what our fiscal situation is right now, and what is that going to mean if we have spiraling debts and deficits that we're currently at $36.2 trillion of debt, $2+ trillion of deficits every year, and that's only going to go up over time. And so if we don't get this under control quickly, then I think investors are concerned about that. What's that going to mean for inflation? What's that going to mean for interest rates? So I think this actually may help put people's minds at ease a little bit, that yes, we actually mean business. We're gonna get spending under control, and when the tax cuts come up later this year, we're going to have done something serious on spending to make sure that this is not just I guess phantom tax cuts that are just going to have to be paid for later on, either with inflation or through higher taxes. So I think this is a great step in the right direction.
That's encouraging to hear. Let's talk about income taxes now. Getting rid or eliminating the income tax with instead using tariffs on goods and goods coming into the United States. The income tax put in place in place during the Civil War to pay for the Civil War, then eliminated after the Civil War. We saw a boom period in the United States, as Donald Trump just talked about. Then they're put back in place in 1913 to fund World War I, and they've never been taken away. And Americans work up until May or June of every year just to pay income taxes. I mean, I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but I think this would be one of the most transformative moves in American history if he does this. What do you make of this?
I mean, it's absolutely shooting for the stars, because I think the income tax has been just a massive anchor around the neck of the American economy and the American people in so many different ways. In a lot of ways we don't necessarily see. We don't necessarily notice all the ways that I think it affects us, but it is huge. But it is a reflection of all the spending that we do. Unfortunately, we didn't raise as much. Well, fortunately, I would say we raised a lot less revenue, collected a lot less taxes in the 1800s. So it would entail a large amount of spending cuts to even consider that option. But I'm very hopeful that we can get as close to that as possible, even if we can't eliminate it fully. Anything we can do in that direction, I think, is a huge step. And even if we get 20% of the way, 50% of the way there, that'd be amazing for the American economy and the American people.
Who would oppose this? Would it be sort of the deep state? I mean, military industrial complex? I mean, the war funding, because you can't have all these wars, as Dr. Ron Paul points out. You can't fund all of these wars unless you have the income tax. So eliminate the income tax, and then suddenly maybe we have to close some of our 900 military bases around the world. We have to get out of the Middle East. We have to stop meddling in Africa. We have to stop meddling in Syria, and we'd actually maybe repatriate some of that money back home. So is that who would be angry about eliminating the income tax?
Well, I think anyone that's living off of the federal government in any way is going to feel impacted by it, because again, if the federal government is spending to the tune of 25% of GDP, which is where we're headed pretty soon. There's a lot of people that are trying to live off of the government in one way or the other. You mentioned the military industrial, the global defense industry. There's going to be people that are just living on the dole, individuals that are living off of welfare that benefit from having kind of lack of an accountability that we have right now with such a large amount of spending. When you're spending that much money, there's just no accountability. And so I think anything we can do to trim that down, get back to having a country that's for the working people that are out getting a paycheck every day, and I think that there's going to be massive pushback from people that are grant. One of the things he was doing just now, of course, is some of these federal grants, and there's a lot of entities out there that are benefiting from those federal grants. Some of them doing good things, some of them not doing such good things. But certainly, I think whatever we can do to look at ways to streamline things so that there's accountability there, I think that's great for our country.
You study tax policy more than most people do, and the economy more than most people do. So if he eliminates income taxes, what do you think that would do to the prosperity of the United States?
I think it would be huge. I mean, what does the income tax do? It just disincentivizes people from being productive. It disincentivizes people from working. It disincentivizes people from saving and investing their money and building new businesses and doing these things that benefit their neighbors. You want to open up a small business. It's pretty hard to do when you have the regulations first of all, and then you have the taxes on top of that. So it's kind of heads because the government's going to take whatever profits you make. But if you're making losses, they're not going to be there to bail you out if like so many businesses you go under in the first year or first 3 or 4 years. You're there sticking your neck out, and you're going to have to bear the losses. But if you're successful, the government's going to come in and take 40% of your money. So I think it would be huge. And President Trump likes to harken back to the late 1800s, kind of the golden age, I think, in a lot of ways for our American economy. We were absolutely, I think, running circles around most of the rest of the world during that period. Not necessarily because tariffs are a wonderful thing. I don't like taxes at all. But if I'm going to choose between a situation where the federal government is collecting a little bit of money from tariffs versus a ton of money from federal income taxes, I think that's a pretty easy decision. That I'd prefer to go back to the era when we were taking a couple percent of GDP from tariffs and excise taxes versus something that just hampers people for being good, productive citizens.
Well, I think we're at a really interesting moment. I mean, we're just like, 6 or 7, 8 days now into the Trump presidency, and we're hearing these major economic moves, sending shockwaves right now through all of the hogs that have just gotten so fat on all of this spending, the endless printing of money. I think this is amazing. I'll get you out of here on this, Doctor, which is on the Inflation Reduction Act and trying to undo and unwind what Biden tried to throw at the sort of the last minute, push out all of that money sort of out the door. Is Trump going to be able to unwind any of that spending that Biden pushed?
I think so. Some of it he can do on his own, actually, because what happened with the Inflation Reduction Act that President Biden and his administration pushed was they passed a bill that supposedly had a couple $100 billion, $250 billion or so of spending on Green New Deal programs, tax credits for solar and wind and electric vehicles and everything else. That's what the CBO said. That's what JCT, the government scorekeepers, were saying. But when when some of the facts actually come out, what we come to find is that it was actually 4 or 5 times more expensive than what the government scorekeepers were saying. Part of that was actually a matter of the Biden administration's executive actions and the Treasury Department making decisions about very loose interpretations of how they're going to interpret the law in order to get people to be able to use these credits. For example, the electric vehicle tax credit, it became such an expansive tax credit. it originally was going to look very, very small in terms of the cost, because it looked like it was something that would only apply if you had a very strict, stuck within very strict guidelines in terms of domestic content for your batteries and the manufacturing and production of your vehicle. But what they did was they kind of switched it out, and there was this other credit that was in there, the commercial clean vehicle credit, which it sounded like it was something that's going to be for businesses. But they set it up so that if you're leasing a vehicle, they're going to count that as a commercial clean vehicle credit. So just by leasing it, that made it something that got around these rules, so that now you can use these credits for vehicles that are, getting a lot of their content from China or from wherever. And so that's just kind of something that was done through executive action and through the executive branch. And so some of this can actually be trimmed back. Some of the mandates in terms of the EPA and some of those restrictions in terms of trying to push everyone into electric vehicles, there's an interaction there with these tax credits. And if on the regulatory side we're pushing everyone into these into clean vehicles, EV vehicles, that's going to obviously make the tax credits for those vehicles that much more expensive. So yes, there's some things he can do on his own. A lot of it's going to have to go through Congress, though, and that's going to be a big task for this big, beautiful bill that they've been talking about, whether that's one bill or two bills, to try to pare back some of those green credits.
Right. Well, that's coming up here really, really shortly here in the next few days. So we'll be watching it closely. Dr. Preston Bashir, we really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for your expertise on this. And what a crazy day. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Clayton.
It is a crazy day. You bet. What do you guys think about that? Would you guys like the income tax removed? I mean, it's like the dumbest question in the world, right? Maybe we should put up a poll. Can you imagine the person that says no?
I would be so distrustful of anybody that was like, no. I'd be like, who the hell
it's like Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, get out of my chat room. You don't get to comment here. By the way, Pelosi just a few minutes ago posted about that. She made some comments saying this is, deeply, what did she say? Illegal what the president did, like to try to move on this on these federal freezing platforms and try to stop all the federal funding and all of this. So that's illegal. By the way, I should point out they've added a DOGE clock, Department of Government Efficiency clock, now to the national debt. And so far in 8 days, take a look at this. $30 billion has now been saved from DOGE. And look at that thing going up and up and up from government spending. So $30 billion in 8 days that the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk, and his team there are working to cut. So will we see it go up by another $3 trillion? We'll have to see. All right, we've got more news to get to. We're going to talk about these ICE raids tonight on the show because Kristi Noem in New York City just a short time ago when she was there this morning putting on tactical gear saying we are here to clean up the streets of these dirtbags. So she rode along with ICE. Can you imagine any other, remember the Biden administration doing a ride along with ICE? No. And so far, the numbers are staggering. They're closing in on 10,000 illegal immigrants, criminals that they've now caught and are now in the process of deporting in just 8 days. And Hollywood is melting down over this, of course. So we're going to talk about that. But first, winners don't make resolutions. Resolutions break. Instead, they just start and then they maximize the momentum. In fact, we were just talking about that before the show, about getting on a better health kick and eating healthier here on the Redacted team. And if your goal is health span, it's being able to live better for longer. There's a few non-negotiables in your life. One of them is quality. When it comes to supplements geared toward high quality performers, no one does it like Momentous. They invest in NSF certification, meaning every batch of their supplements is tested for heavy metals, harmful additives, and the label claim accuracy, and is the reason they're trusted by all 32 NFL teams and collegiate sports teams and dietitians all over the country. And there was a report last week that came out about a lot of people's protein blends that they're taking, and they have all these heavy metals in them. Yeah, well, what the heck? You think you're taking a protein shake that's healthy for you, and it's got heavy metals in it? Not these guys. I had a protein shake that I was using. I threw it in the trash. And now I'm only using Momentous because I don't want any of those heavy metals when I'm doing a protein shake after the gym. Momentous believes in nailing the basics with bone-crushing consistency and curating an intentional routine based on your individual goals. And by the basics, we mean protein and creatine. So Momentous sources CreaPure, which is the purest form of creatine monohydrate available. It's an absolute must for both men and women for peak physical and cognitive performance. So go right now to livemomentous.com. If you take a protein shake every day, like after the gym, you got to check these guys out. I'm telling you, you don't know what sort of heavy metals are hiding in the crap that you're eating right now. I threw mine in the trash, and I spent like $50 on that bag of stuff too. I was pissed. But you know what? I don't want that stuff in my body. So go there, livemomentous.com. Try it today, 20% off with code REDACTED, and start living on purpose. Well, in the past 7 days, ICE agents have now arrested and started the deportation process of over 7,300 illegal alien criminals as of today on this Tuesday, including a number of child rapists, murderers, sex traffickers, and more crimes that are just too numerous to list here. Of course, Democrats in Washington under the Biden administration not only knew about this, they helped facilitate all of this into the United States. They had no problem letting these child rapists stay here in the United States. Our next guest, in fact, testified before Congress back in September, letting Democrats know and the Biden administration know that there are massive numbers of child rapists in the United States. She is a crime victims advocate. She was telling the story of an 11-year-old, Maria Gonzalez, who was brutally raped and murdered by an illegal immigrant. Watch this.
When Maria went to the door, there's a little chain that we have in those apartments, right? When you open the door to try to keep us safe, that chain was not enough to keep this animal out of Maria's apartment. He pushed his way in, and Maria fought for her life. She was 11 years old. To all of you, 3 little girls passing away may not be many, but what if one of those little girls was your daughter, your granddaughter, or your niece? Can you imagine them trying to fight off a grown man off of them? The shock of being undressed, the pain of being beaten and smothered, trying to fight for your life while a predator's one objective is to use them to satisfy their sick and demented appetites. Our girls deserve protection. Our girls deserve to live their life without fear. Our girls deserve to perish in a natural manner of old age.
And joining me now is that crime victims advocate, April Aguirre, who is testifying before Congress there. April, thank you so much for joining us here on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So over the past 7 days, we've seen a massive number of deportations and arrests, over 7,000 of them. It's almost as if they knew exactly where these people were, that they were able to swoop in almost immediately and start arresting and deporting these people. How does that sit with you?
It doesn't sit well with me. I just cannot believe that we would allow these individuals to continue in minority communities, to continue harming minority communities, because we have misaligned sympathies. When somebody shows you who they are, believe them. Why sit there and give somebody a bond that they can go out back into the communities that they're harming? So it just doesn't make sense. Where do we account for flight risk when somebody's not even from this country? So yes, they knew exactly where to go because a lot of these people have already been previously charged with crimes, never made it back to their court dates, were out on bail, and they have their addresses. The worst of the worst have already committed crimes here in the United States.
I mean, I know it's hard to put a number on it. How many of these people do you think have been multiple offenders? They've raped a child and then they've been released on bond and they get to do it all over again.
I like to use the example of when an individual gets pulled over for DWI. Do you really think that's the first time that they got on the road behind the wheel drunk, or just the first time they were caught? Right. So I always wonder, how many people have they harmed? How many children, how many families have they harmed? And some children that haven't even spoken up yet before they were caught.
It's really deeply disturbing and disgusting. What do you think is the motivation for the release of these individuals? Mostly happening, I believe, in a lot of sanctuary cities and Democrat stronghold cities. Can you talk about that as a crime victims advocate? What were you advocating for? That they stay behind bars or that they are deported?
So I believe that when an individual comes into this country, right? And they commit a crime, whether they came in here illegally or legally, they should not be afforded bail. They are not U.S. citizens where they have the same rights as our Constitution protects U.S. citizens, right? And they are the definition of a flight risk. They have no community ties. So why would we further risk the community by releasing them back into the communities that they're harming? So we have a huge problem in democratic cities where they don't believe in incarceration because somebody is low income. Being low income should not give you a discount pass to continue to commit crimes.
Right. Right. And do you see a double standard for American citizens who are born here and commit crimes and are held or put in, behind bars, maybe permanently or for many years for similar crimes? Do you see sort of a double standard for those who are here illegally?
I think that if a U.S. citizen does not have community ties and was not from the community and they could not prove those community ties, could not prove that they had good work standings, I don't think they'd be so easily released on bail. But we have misaligned sympathies. We are not going after these people. As you know, there's a police officer shortage in the whole entire United States. So the likelihood of you being caught while committing a crime is so low right now that if you do get caught, how sloppy were you and how bolden were you to just be committing these crimes to where the police could catch up to you?
Yeah, it's a great point. Hollywood celebrities, sort of an epicenter of pedophilia in Hollywood. They're sort of outraged about these raids. And by the way, we predicted this on the show last year. Once we heard that they were going to immediately start enforcing and do mass deportations of these illegal criminals, I predicted that the liberal media was going to start painting these as like stormtroopers. They were coming through and destroying communities, these ICE raids and all of this. And you saw this yesterday from Selena Gomez, Hollywood actress. Watch her in tears over what she says, the children.
I just want to say that I'm so sorry. All my people are getting attacked. The children. I don't understand. I'm so sorry. I wish I could do something, but I can't. I don't know what to do. I'll try everything, I promise.
So what was your response when you saw Selena Gomez crying about the children? Here you were testifying before Congress about children in the United States being murdered, raped by these illegal immigrants. So what is she talking about here?
Once again, we come back to misaligned sympathies. And I did not see a tear from Selena or Jimmy Fallon or those folks there at the late night TV shows over these matters. But as soon as they start deportations, and I want you to know that Tom Holland has made it very clear, we are deporting the worst of the worst first, right? They're focusing on criminal migrants, okay? So I don't know where this sadness is coming from Selena Gomez. I understand why she deleted the post because it's silly. It really is silly. I just don't get it. When I think about children, I did not become a crime victim advocate because this is something that I wanted to do. I completely do it for free when there is need. I have 2 little girls here in the city of Houston that were killed within a year in the same manner by the same type of people. They were young, they were vulnerable, beautiful young ladies, and most important of all, underage. They were both killed by migrants that had just gotten here a couple of weeks and saw them as prey. Where were the tears for those children? An 11-year-old who was also a migrant, and you had the 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungare. So when I think about their last moments of life with those type of individuals, it makes me just hurt inside. That's where the tears should be cried to. Those children that perished under these monsters' hands. For a second, I ask people, think about a little girl in your family, a daughter, a granddaughter, having to fight off a grown man. Her last moments of life, dealing with that type of pain and suffering, the humiliation of having their clothes ripped off of them, and to experience that type of violence in their last moments of life. I often think about that, and it pushes me to want to advocate more. And that's how I ended up in Washington, because the truth is that these migrant children that come to this country are fleeing from something terrible on the other side of the border. So to want to allow everybody into this country is to remake the same areas, the same type of culture that they're running away from. This is why Hispanics came out and voted for Donald Trump. An unimaginable amount of people came out. Nobody could have predicted the shift in the Hispanic community to want to vote for a Republican president. Why? Because the ones that actually have ever lived in Mexico never want to go back, never want to put their families through that. Selena Gomez says, those are my people. No, Selena Gomez, you were born in Texas. You're a U.S. citizen. You have no idea the dangers and the horrors that are across the border. And to cry for these people that are here wreaking havoc, not only to migrants, but to citizens alike, is sickening.
Well said. Well said. And, you know, what really gets me is to think that 340,000 children, and those are the numbers we know about, I think it's probably much higher than that, were facilitated under the Biden administration, brought into the United States, lost, unaccounted for, many of them killed, raped in the same manners, and we have no idea. And it's absolutely disgusting that this happened on their watch.
A lot of people don't understand the culture in Mexico, okay? There's even a term. It's called femicidio. Femicidio is a term because when you're killed simply because being a woman or a girl, right? And now, mind you, murder numbers in Mexico are so swayed. Community members, citizens of Mexico have been talking about this for years, that those numbers are just not accurate. They're extremely low in comparison to what actually is going on. And the number of missing women and girls does not apply to the murdered number, right? So in the combination of the numbers that are released, it's astonishing. There is a culture of sexual predators that thrive in Mexico and Central America because they don't have the resources or the want to investigate these types of murders. A little girl being raped and murdered is not uncommon in Mexico or Central America. There's not really a collection of DNA where they're really going after the predator, and their DNA system there in the forensic center in Mexico is a joke. So if you look at the amount of people that are actually prosecuted for murdering or raping a little girl or woman, they're minute, right? So these individuals that came and murdered, Maria Gonzalez, 11 years old, Jocelyn Ungare, 12 years old, were only here in the United States under a month. You're telling me that was the first time they killed? No, they were comfortable doing it. They were comfortable doing it, right? This was not their first time. We go back to the DWI situation. Was it your first time doing it, or was it your first time getting caught?
Right. Well said. Yeah, I don't want to see any more tears from these people. It's absolutely disgusting. I don't want to see any more posts on social media crying about it. No, you need to be crying for these little girls that have been sex trafficked and murdered.
And one other thing, the liberal media was mute when Barack Obama deported 3.6 million people. Were they asking, are they criminals? Were they asking, have they committed a crime in their country? Have they committed a crime here? There was no questions asked. There was nothing said. Obama quietly deported 3.6 million people, and nobody batted an eyelash. There was no Selena Gomez tears.
Who built the cages? Who built the cages, right?
Obama.
Yeah, I love the hypocrisy. Well, thank you for speaking truth to power on this, and keep doing what you're doing. I hope we've turned a corner here in the United States, because this needs to stop. I think this is the most important story in America right now, and I think this needs to stop right now. April, thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, sir.
Wow, thanks so much, April. We really appreciate it. What a brave person. And you know, all of these scoundrels in Washington, D.C., I hope the water is rising for all of these rats who have allowed these rapists and child sex traffickers to proliferate across the United States. I hope they root them out. I really do. I think we're making progress on that front. Well, hey, I thank you guys so much for subscribing to the show. It's free to subscribe to us here on YouTube and Rumble and on X. Just click the little subscribe button, and you can turn on a little bell notification, but I think it works sometimes. A lot of you say that you do get notifications. Some say you never get notifications. So I don't know. It's worth trying it, though. When we go live, we're live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So I guess subscribe and turn on that little bell notification, and hopefully it'll work. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Like, do you guys ever see notifications? It's unbelievable how they pick and choose. If we were CNN, I'm sure you'd get all sorts of notifications. But because we're independent media, we don't have billions of dollars. and we actually try to tell you the truth every day instead of the propaganda, then they don't want you to hear that. So, but anyway, thank you guys so much for being a part of our community here. We really appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Again, we've got some great guests lined up for you for the rest of the week. Whitney Webb is going to be joining us on Thursday here on the show, and we're looking forward to that, plus so much more. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you back here tomorrow.